And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight we're joined by my guest, Samantha. Samantha, thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a mom from Michigan, and I am a lifelong experiencer. I've had otherworldly encounters since I was born, and I was born and raised in a poltergeist house in Lansing, Michigan. And I finally just published a book about everything that I've seen, and everything that I've witnessed and experienced just a couple months ago, where I go through every experience that I've had over the past 30 years. Um, so yeah, that's I've had experiences from the poltergeist activity to UFOs to out of body experiences and extrasensory perception. So yeah, this is right in my ballpark. I love talking about this stuff.
So you're from Michigan. Have you been in Michigan your whole life?
Yep.
So you're not too far from, I think my dad, I don't think it was Lansing, but originally I think he was in Jackson when he was
Oh,
born, and then they moved to
okay.
Florida. But yeah, he was from up in that area a little bit.
Yep, I know where that is.
And
I'm at this point, I'm just a couple hours north of Lansing.
okay.
But the house I grew up in was in Lansing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would like to. You wrote a book, and before we kind of like the topics of your book, I don't want to spoil it for anyone that would want to look into the book. But is there a few things that you experienced when you were younger that kind of led you down this path of wanting to write about it? Like, what were some of the things that set off this whole chain of events for you?
Yeah, so the house I was born in, it was I call it the Britton house because Britton was the name of the street. So that's just kind of what we call it. And it was built in 1923 in an old neighborhood in Lansing. And I have had just living there was like constant experience after experience. But my first ever encounter, my first memory actually, was an out of body experience that was an encounter with three golden beings. And I was only about, it was before I could speak. So I was maybe between 1 and 2 years old. And what I remember was being out of body at the top of the staircase and having a being to my left and one to my right. And then looking down the staircase, there was a third one at the bottom of the staircase looking up at us. And they were they were floating, and they were these transparent, like they kind of looked like your typical cherub angel being, just a little bit different. And they were transparent, but all of their details were outlined in gold glitter. And so it looked like they were very detailed, and it looked like they were just drawn so detailed with gold. And they spoke telepathically to me, and they also expressed their emotions and their intention and what they were feeling and what they were asking of me. And I feel like they also transferred some of their abilities and um yeah, through this telepathic bridge that was between me and all three of them. Um, and when I was out of body during this experience, I remember how heightened it was being in the other realm and being in my eternal body in their presence. Um, and it was like it was such a it was such an incredible experience, and it opened the door so wide open for these things for me for the rest of my life. And I call it's the first chapter in my book where I talk about this because I kind of go like in chronological order of all my experiences. Um, and I call it summon for initiation because I feel like I was summoned out of body by these beings for this initiation into the other realms and into this connection with the other side. And so I was standing between these two beings at the top of the staircase, and they started encouraging me to lift up off of the ground and levitate. And I just had this knowing within me of kind of what to do and how to do it, almost as if I was already familiar with the ability. Or maybe it was because they transferred it to me, so I had that understanding. But I I used the energy within myself and I pulled it out and I interacted my own energy with the energies that were flowing all around me. And so I was in like this ocean of these currents that were like they had sound and they had energy and they had a tone and they had and I could almost see some of them. The light from them, it was like you could see all of your senses were seeing all of these things at once. And so I used my own energy to interact with the field around me, to move up and down and left and right, and so to, like, lift up through these currents that were around me. It's really, really hard to explain how I did this with words because it's so beyond words how this happened. Um, but basically, I lifted off of the ground and I was hovering then between the 2. And then they told me to let it's time to go down the staircase now. Let's go down. And so I leaned forward and I started floating down the staircase. And they followed me all the way down. One was on my left side and one was on my right side. And I can still see the image or the basically the visuals of watching my feet pass over the steps as I'm floating down the stairs and having the steps like as I'm floating down and watching them pass beneath my feet. And so when I get to the bottom and meet the third angel at the bottom, then I'm surrounded by all three of them and they're blasting me with this amazing energy. They were celebrating and they weren't even using their faces, like facial expressions, to let me know that they were happy or celebrating because they just had like these kind of like straight, kind looks on their faces. So they didn't use their face to express themselves. It was from the energy that they were filling my being with. That's how I knew that they were celebrating and that they were proud of me and that they were excited. So that was my first memory. That was my first ever experience of my life, and, um, it, uh, it I don't know what I would do without it because it's like I had their presence with me growing up in that haunted house that had so many malicious and dark spirits that I encountered day and night. Um, and I know that I was protected by, not only God, but many guardians and otherworldly beings that came to um, protect me and guide me. And they were definitely one of them or three of them. But something that I realized as I was like, it's kind of like I always knew it, but I didn't really think too hard on it until I started writing my book a couple years ago. That during this encounter, when I was out of body, even though my physical body was a toddler, in that heightened state, like in my higher self's body, I had the mindset that I have now as an adult. Like I wasn't restricted, my awareness and my consciousness and my mindset wasn't restricted by the physical world brain of a toddler because I was out of it. And yeah, that was pretty interesting to think about too, because I didn't really, yeah, I didn't really come to that conclusion, I guess, until recently. Like, yeah, I didn't feel like a child at all. I felt like I do right now. So that was my first experience.
Your first experience is very reminiscent to a couple of other people that I spoke to.
Really?
They had mentioned before that they were levitated and they were brought down the stairs. And the similarities like that, it makes me wonder how often is this one of the characteristics of these types of experiences? Because I think you're like now the third person that I've interviewed over the last couple of years that have specifically mentioned like the telepathic conversation of them telling like lifting them up, levitating them down.
Wow.
It's it makes me wonder like what what do you think these things were? Because when I've talked to other people, they thought they were aliens. Do you see them as that, or do you see them as like a spiritual guardian?
Um, I definitely knew, just as an understanding, that they were sent by something greater. Um, and I know that they were interdimensional, or you could use the word spiritual. Um, yeah, so I know that if I was stuck in the physical realm during the like, I probably wouldn't have been able to visualize their form because they were on, they were in that other realm or that higher dimension. Um, so since I was out of body and able to access the visuals of, of that heightened place, I was able to interact with them and have that encounter. But yeah, I wouldn't for those specific beings, I wouldn't use the word alien. I have encountered things that would fit that bill, but these ones were more um teachers or guardians.
The one person that I interviewed, he originally thought they were ghosts, and then he'd saw, I think it was from Communion, the cover of Communion's what it was, and
Ah,
he saw the alien on that when he was a child, and then he realized that these things weren't ghosts; they were beings.
wow. I've heard that so much where someone will specifically Whitley's communion cover where someone will see that and they just have these flashbacks or the realization like that guy had.
Mhm.
But yeah, I wow. I have seen the gray type of beings as well. And it definitely does give you that feeling like that you've seen that. And
Mhm.
that's really wild that those beings that did that with him were those types of beings or that was their form. And I do question um whether these beings whether that was their true form because I know that things can um these interdimensional beings and from my experience there's many different beings other than humans that are in these other realms and other dimensions and that can also step into the physical realm but uh sorry I'm just lost my
No, you're good.
um and oh man I'm sorry
No, it's okay.
um I was saying that Oh gosh, what was I saying?
When
That
the beans, like when people have recognized them from his stuff, and then like how you'd you've heard stuff like that, and then yours were, and you just kind of it went off.
yeah, oh, okay, I got it now. Thank you. That these interdimensional beings can, um, they can show themselves as what they kind of like to show themselves
Hmm.
as of like they can project their form as kind of what would fit the mind of the experiencer or the witness. And I've also heard of, people, maybe groups of people having encounters with one being and they all see something different. Um, so yeah, it makes me question, some of the encounters I've had throughout my life. Was the form that I was shown their true form, or was that just something that maybe they thought that would give me comfort in the moment?
I've often wondered, and gets brought up a lot on different episodes, but I feel like a lot of this stuff is all connected in one way or the other. So maybe when people see something, it's unique to them in the sense of it's what they show them represent themselves as, and our mind interprets it the best way that we can. And obviously, when people experience things and they question stuff that makes no sense, like, I don't know if that's just because they want us to keep questioning this stuff. They want us to look into it. So they give us things that don't make any sort of sense because it continues to add to the mystery. Like, are we not supposed to find out all the answers? So they continuously lead of us breadcrumbs. But if you go through history, back in hundreds of years ago, they used to talk about fairy abductions. They talked about the
Mhm.
fae folk and everything. Well, nowadays we have alien abductions. And what we say were aliens are now all of a sudden interdimensional.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
what if the fairies were the things that now we call what if it's all the same thing? It's just as we evolve and like become more science techy, these things have also been adapting too. So they try and just adapt as we adapt. So
Yeah,
they represent whatever they think our brains are capable of understanding.
yeah, I've heard that theory before, and I do think that it applies to a lot of what people witness. Um, and I love getting into the stories that were recorded hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago with all these sorts of beings, and then you get into the Fey folk and the little people and all of these things that people really saw, and they recorded what they actually saw. During the time of when these things were recorded and written down, they weren't joking. They weren't making up fiction. They were actually recording things that they really saw. Um, and it does make you wonder, are they are they the same? And I think that some of it is, but at the same time, I think about how many different types of things that I've seen and how I felt that they were different from one another, like in their actual nature. And I know that people even today have seen little people or have seen what they would explain as a fairy or um, all sorts of different things. I know I've seen a little old dwarf woman um, that might be explained as like a type of fae being, if you were talking a few hundred years ago. Um, but yeah, so I think some of it is, but I also think that I do think that some of these beings are different in nature.
Hmm. I don't think every single one is the same thing. I think there are different variations of them, but I still think a lot of it may come from the same, I don't know, I don't want to say reality, but the same plane of existence, I guess. Wherever they're from, I think they all kind of come from that
Yeah,
realm.
I agree. Yeah, and it's like you said, it's all connected. I totally agree with that. I think that because I know that sometimes people like to group these things separately. Like the Bigfoot encounters are separate from the UFO encounters, and they're separate from the paranormal activity, and they're separate from out of body experiences, but it's all from this same realm. It's all from this it's like all of these things that are non-physical that people experience is the real nature, the true nature of reality just screaming at us. Like
Hmm.
this is what these are the things that surround us everywhere. And there's so much around us at all times. And there's so many others. And yeah, it all and a lot of these beings are interdimensional. And honestly, I think that because we don't just have this physical form, we also have uh, a second body, or a spiritual body, or an astral body, or an eternal body, whatever someone would like to call it. But I've also heard that we have a third body, depending on the culture that you're looking at. I believe it's Hindu culture that uh, recognizes a third body. Um, and so I really do believe that humans are also interdimensional beings, but that we have forgotten who we are, and we've forgotten our abilities, and we have slowly but surely walked away from our true nature. And I think that now is the time for us to kind of turn that around and step back into our identity so that we can do the things that we're really capable of again.
I think a lot of our ways are blocked off. And I don't know if that was done intentionally or not, but I think there's a lot more that we are capable of as a human with our mind that for whatever reason we just are not in tune with it as we used to be.
Yeah, I think so too. I think from it being yeah, and like you said, not sure if it's done intentionally. Like if there was an outside source that did that to us, or if it was something that we did to ourselves somehow. Um, but I know that all of these things still lie dormant within us, and it's really the question is, how do we reactivate these things?
Hmm.
But um, I know that being exposed to otherworldly beings and presences, and exposed to other realms and having conscious experiences on the other side does seem to activate things that were lying dormant.
What are some of the other things you've experienced? Because you said you've wrote about everything you've experienced within the last 30 years. So is there anything else that you think would be interesting for the listeners that would find appealing to the sense that maybe they would want to check out the rest of your book? Because we just kind of scratched the surface on just what got you like your first experience. And that first experience is kind of one of those experiences that sets the whole thing up to where I don't want to say like the sense of it set it up to like for more interesting things like that, but like the floating ones are the ones that always get to me. Like if your body is floating through the
Yeah.
air, it's like that's something you don't forget.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, so I'll get into the house I grew up in a little bit. So because that was kind of like the things that kind of came along soon after that encounter, that first encounter. Because I had experiences in this poltergeist house ever since I can remember, as far back as my memory takes me. And I know that things were happening there even before I was born, because I got in touch with a woman that lived there in the 80s that had very similar encounters as well. So I don't know if it's something to do with the land the house is built on, or if things were done there, back in the early 1900s that kind of brought on some of this activity, or if it's both. My guess is it's both. Um, But some things that would happen there on a regular basis growing up, and this was day and night. This is not like I would have an experience, one day and then like maybe 6 months later something else weird would happen. This was like every day, every night, struggling to like make it through to the next hour, to the next day, make it through the night, just so you can do it again, just so you can, because it was constant. And so there were these heavy boot stomps that would follow above my head all the time. There was We would see apparitions and hear voices, and there was also something. I don't know if it was an actual entity or if it was a strange. I mean, my guess is it was an entity, but it was some strange force that when and this happened to me countless times growing up at the Britton house. I would take those first few steps down the stairs. So I was upstairs on the second floor where the bedrooms were. Walk down the hallway, take those first few steps down the stairs, and then there was this flat landing that the staircase would turn and go the rest of the way down, and the rest of the way down was maybe like 17, 18 more steps. Um and as soon as you hit the landing and turned, I was lifted up into the air and shot all the way down the staircase at a really high speed. And my and it's crazy because my legs and my arms would all be straight up in the air, and I was just barely hitting the center of my back on each step on the way down until I hit the bottom. Um, and I wouldn't trip and I wouldn't slip or fall, nothing. I was just lifted and shot down. And then when I hit the bottom, uh, then I wasn't able to take in air into my lungs. I actually couldn't inhale. And so I would sit there and I would pray that I would be able to breathe in time before I suffocated. Um, and the air was allowed to come back into my lungs every single time, right on time, right before I started to feel like it was getting dangerous, that I couldn't breathe. Um, and so this happened to me many, many times living there. Also happened to my brother, and it happened to the residents that lived there before us. And when I was writing, I actually got into contact with the woman that lived there the decade before me. And I found out that this happening to her and her sister, getting lifted and shot down the staircase and getting hurt on the steps like that, well, just their back, actually. And the same thing would happen to them, where the center of their back was just barely smacking the steps as they're shot all the way down. And they were the reason that the steps were carpeted when I was there, because thankfully the steps were carpeted when this happened to me in the 90s and into the early 2000s. Um, but for her, they were bare wood. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine how much that hurt, to have your back slam the bare wood all the way down the steps all the time. um, and the same thing is, everyone who experienced this, they never tripped or fell. They were actually lifted and then shot. Um, so that's something that happened on a regular living there. And then there was the attic doorway was in the only bathroom in the house. So down the hallway from the bedrooms, that was the bathroom on the second floor, and across from the toilet and the sink was the attic door, and the attic staircase ran up against the wall in the bathroom to go up into the attic. And the door, now that original door is no longer there. I know that because I'm in contact with the current residents. But the doors in the Britton house were like those old wooden doors where like they had the dark brass kind of like flat circular handles, and they had the rectangle of the brass behind it, and they had like the skeleton keyhole underneath the handle. Um and So we would open the attic door, and inside of the door were hundreds of names that were written and carved into the doorway from top to bottom. And then they actually were put on the wall a little bit up into the attic, as if they couldn't all fit on the door. And to this day, I have no idea the purpose of that, but it felt like it was kind of a really eerie, creepy thing that they were there. like for some type of dark purpose. And then the attic staircase was like this skinny little staircase where only one person could really fit going up at once. But anyway, so uh, a lot of the time when you went to the bathroom at night, the footsteps that I feel like it was probably the same presence that followed above my head would come and walk or stomp sometimes all the way down the steps and then stop on the other side of the attic door when you're going to the bathroom. Um, and there was one time that I will never forget when it was one night that I was going to the bathroom after it was dark and after everyone went to bed. My mom was sleeping, my brother was sleeping. Um, and I didn't fall asleep for a while, and then I ended up having to go to the bathroom. So I built up the courage to go in there, and I was sitting down, and all of a sudden, the the stomps come crashing down the staircase. And I mean, it was like the most obnoxious this entity ever did it, and it just stopped right at the bottom, and I was just for a minute, I was petrified. I was just trying to breathe and thinking that the attic doorway is gonna swing open. Something is I know, something is on the other side of the door right now, and it's staring at me, and I can feel its presence. Um, and so I started getting ready to get out of there as fast as I could, but before I can leave the bathroom, it stomped back up the staircase, and it was just it with every step, it crashed its foot as hard as it possibly could, and it just slammed its way up the staircase and went back up into the attic, and I just ran to my room and shut the door, and it was not easy getting to sleep that night.
No, I don't doubt it.
Yeah,
With this making
and
noise and everything else, like, what do you think it could have been as a this is where I like when it comes to stuff that's like paranormal in a sense, like spiritual, and even like to an extent when people say Bigfoot are these spiritual type things, they still leave some sort of a physical they make noise, they leave a footprint. Like
Mhm.
if this thing's making noise, it's have to interact with the surrounding area, so therefore it has to have some sort of physical manifestation.
Yeah, I know that these that other beings or spirits or they can all interact and affect the physical realm or kind of slightly manifest into the physical realm just enough to make noise or speak or maybe show themselves just slightly, or if someone sees like, the mist of an apparition or something like that. Um, and yeah, so they can definitely it is interesting to think like how they do it. Um, but I know that they do that they're in the other realm, and that's kind of where they're residing, like we are residing in this realm. But that they're able to kind of cross over, whether it's just a little bit, just enough so that we hear them, or whether it's complete, like, total crossover where we see their full form and where we can touch them or, um, yeah, it is really wild to think about that the fact that happens.
I don't know how I'd ever go to sleep if I was hearing all that noise again.
It was it was definitely it was a struggle. I mean, there was I I always shut my door at night as I was growing up, just so I wouldn't have to listen to the things that happened outside of my room and above my room in the attic, because that just added to, the things that I was able to hear and sense. So I felt like I kind of at least limited it to my bedroom. And I fell asleep with the light on and kept the light on all night, countless times throughout my childhood, because it made it feel like it was daytime, and at least I was a little bit had a little bit more comfort than I would if it was totally dark. But, I mean, there were times when things would come and sit on the end of my bed, and I would see the comforter, squish down, at the end of my bed where I sensed this presence come in, and there was there were a lot of times when I sat out on the roof right next to my bedroom because I had one window that faced the street and then I had another window that faced the roof, and it was kind of like you could step right out into the roof that was over the porch right out of my bedroom. And so I sat out there a lot just to kind of clear my head. But the crazy thing is I got so tuned to sensing these things without seeing or hearing them. I could sense when something was coming into the room or approaching me, before it manifested as, something I could see or sound or anything like that. Um, and so there were actually times where I would sit on the porch roof just outside of my bedroom window and I would sense something come across my room, and I had my back to the window and I would sense it come all the way to the window, and I would sense its presence just very heavy, just staring right at me. And some of the things in the house, they had the strength and the ability to lift me and launch me down the staircase. And so I actually kept a book in the window so that it wouldn't shut, because those old windows, if you let it shut from the outside, you couldn't get it back open. And so I had to leave it cracked. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get back in the house. And so I always had a book with me that I actually held too the entire time. I wouldn't let the book go because I was afraid that something was gonna pull it out so that I couldn't come back in. And so, yeah, so I would always hold the book extra tight when I felt something come up behind me, and I knew that a presence was there right at the window inside the house when I was trying to get some air and escape a little bit.
I'm reading through the original email that you sent me, and the one thing that I really want to discuss before we wrap things up here in a little bit, you'd mentioned you were taken to a cube-shaped UFO. I
Yep.
would like to know a little bit more about this cube-shaped UFO because I haven't recorded the episode, but I know someone that has seen something like this, but it's not something you hear very often.
It's not. And I I would love to. I can't wait to hear their what they've seen too, because it's not something that I've ran into very often either. Actually, the first person I spoke to about this, like, over the phone, was I about a month ago, and I'm waiting for this podcast episode to get released, hopefully next week or the week after. Is I was on with Whitley Strieber, and he also talked about encountering a cube-shaped UFO, several times throughout his life. Um, and so I know that other people have seen it, but it's like I know you hear about like the disc or the triangular shaped a lot or the tic tac shape, but the cube shaped is not really something that is as heard of. So yeah, this encounter, it happened when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I was laying in bed one night at the Britton house, and I was awake still. I was just kind of, I had my eyes open and I was just kind of trying to get sleepy, and I had my door shut. And I did have the lights off that night. And I remember just kind of like looking at the moonlight that was shining through the blinds on my wall. And I was just laying there thinking. And all of a sudden I felt I felt a presence come near me, and I knew that I was not alone. And then these two angelic beings manifested above me when I was laying there in bed. And they were like these women with big wings, and they had these white gowns on, and they were just looking at me. And then what they did was they reached out and they put their hands underneath me, and then they pulled me up, but they pulled my spiritual body out from my physical body. So they separated me, and I felt myself like pop out of my physical body. And when I did, and I had felt this freedom so many times before that and after that, but for some this was just such a powerful experience, maybe because I was also in their presence. But that that place that I entered into fully, that was home. And as soon as I was out and I watched my physical body lay there in bed as I was lifted up higher into the air, and the physical world was at that point, it was a dream, it was a memory. Um, and so they lifted me through the ceiling and through the roof of the house, and they started carrying me through the sky. And we were going higher and higher in the night sky. And we started going through some clouds, and then we went through this break in the clouds, and off in the distance, up a little bit higher, was this floating cube. And it was probably the size of a house, but it was just stationary in the clouds, and it was like this dark gray, maybe with a little bit of a tint of blue in it, like a dark steel blue. And it had no signs of propulsion, it had no signs of an engine or fuel, it had no sound. And so when we got up to it, when we got close enough, the side of it that we were facing, it opened up so that we can enter in, but it wasn't like a doorway where we know a doorway would open. The entire side of this cube lowered its density so that we could pass through it. And so we passed through the wall, and then after passing through, its density was regained. It came back to the solid structure that it was just a second ago. Um, and so inside was one big room, and it was bright white. All of the walls, the ceilings, the floor, everything was shining with this white light. It wasn't blinding, but it was glowing white. Um, and there were all of these boxes on the floor, like moving boxes is what they looked like. Um, and the two beings set me in one of the boxes that were close to the wall. And on the wall, there was a shelf. And so the beings set me down and they floated to the corner of the room and they just started watching me, observing me. And I looked up at the shelf, and I think I remember it being 3 tiers, and there were items across each shelf. I don't remember exactly what the items were, but small little like trinkets and items were on each shelf. And I received this understanding that I needed to reach for one of those items on the shelf. So I was about 6 or 7, and this box I was standing in was probably at my chest. And so it was a pretty big box. But I mean, I was small, I was a child, so maybe it wasn't too big, but it was big enough where I was not able to just like step out of it. And so I stood on my toes and I was reaching as far as I could to try and reach for one of these items on the shelf, and I just could not reach. And so I turned around and looked at the beings that took me there kind of for direction, and they transferred telepathically this encouragement into my being. And so I turned around and I tried again and again, and I just couldn't reach it. And so they they came to me and they lifted me out of the box. Um, and another thing, in the cube, on the other side of it, the opposite side from where we came in, that side was open slightly, where these two men that I knew were not human, even though they kind of seemed to look human, they were loading boxes either in or out from a craft that was hovering outside of the cube on that side. So there was a craft hovering on the other side of the cube that was a lot smaller than the cube, and they were loading boxes in or out of that craft. Um, and so the after I couldn't reach anything on the shelf, the two beings took me out of the box and they took me out of the cube, and they carried me back through the sky and through the roof of the Britton house and through the ceiling in my bedroom, and they set me back into my physical body, and I felt myself like snap back in, and my two bodies um rejoin. And I just and as soon as I joined my physical body, they were gone. and I was by myself again. And I just laid there and I was like vibrating and I just laid there and I was excited and I was in shock and I had so many questions. Um so yeah, that was that encounter. And that was my second really, really amazing experience um after the three golden beings.
The golden beans, how big were they?
They were probably about the size of maybe a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old.
Okay. So
Yeah, like
so
a young child. Not
so,
a toddler, but a little, like a child.
so about between 4 to 5 feet.
Yeah, maybe 4 feet.
Okay.
Maybe 3.5 or 4 feet tall if they were standing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's usually about the size people depict some of these beans to be. So that,
Yep.
again, kind of aligns with all of that. Before we wrap this up, I would like to talk a little bit about your book. You said you've written all of this stuff of all the things you've experienced. We've only scratched the surface on a little bit of it today. What made you decide that you wanted to write this book? Was there something that just kind of clicked? Be like, you know what, I want to start documenting this stuff. Like, what was your motivation to turn all this into a book?
So it all started when I was actually really little. And these all these types of beings that I was encountering, some of them I'm not sure exactly which ones, but I know that it was more of the good ones that they told me telepathically when I was little that I was gonna write a book about the things that I've seen. And so just a couple years ago, I've always known that I was gonna write a book about these things, and all throughout my life, I've had encounter after encounter, and it's been constant, basically. And so I was always like, I can't wait, to write a book about this. But it was never the time. It was never because writing a book, it takes so much time and it takes at least a couple years, and it takes a lot, and it was never really the time to, and I also didn't feel like it was the right time. Um but a couple years ago, I started getting these signs and these synchronicities, and then all of a sudden it was just I had this opportunity come up where I had the ability to finally write it, and I was just told, like, now is the time to write it. I actually had a voice come into my head and say, "Write so others can be captivated by your mind." That was the exact words that came from this source that let me know that now is the time to write what I've seen. And so I started writing, and it was such a journey, bringing everything that I've ever seen to the surface. And because there was a lot of really, really traumatic experiences that I had at the Britton house, and some of them are actually still resurfacing and being, um, you know, uh, coming forward to this day. And I know that I have so many memories that are kind of buried in my subconscious that I don't have complete access to yet. And I also have a lot of blocks of time from my childhood that I completely do not recall. I have a lot of times that when I was growing up, that are totally blacked out. Um, and so it was a real journey bringing everything to the surface as I wrote it from the moment I that first encounter happened up until today. And actually, as I wrote for because started writing in June of 2024, up until this February of 2026. So it was just over or right about a year and a half, um, that I was writing and, doing all the other stuff that it takes to finish it up. But things kept happening. And so I kept having to add more and more experiences to the end of the book as I was writing the book. Um, and yeah, so on top of that, on top of knowing that this is part of my purpose here, because I know that I'm meant to speak up about these things and be someone who kind of helps open the door for other people to feel comfortable talking about this stuff. But on top of that, I'm so glad and I'm so grateful to be a voice for people who feel like they can't talk about this stuff. Whether it's an abduction experience or whether they grew up in a haunted house or whether, it was this or that, or they had an out of body experience and they think they're going crazy, um, or maybe they understand it, but they feel like they can't talk to anyone about it because, they might be labeled crazy, or their reputation at work could be ruined, or whatever. There's so many people who have these experiences, and a lot of them feel they can't say anything about it, and I think that has to change. And I know a lot of people, as time goes on, are realizing that that does have to change, and I'm so excited to be one of the people that tell my full story, and it's raw, and I don't hold anything back, and I go through every single detail that I can possibly remember, and yeah, I'm so glad to be a voice for people, and so that, and maybe they'll see some of their experiences in mine when they read my story and all the things that I've seen. Because I know that actually, as I was writing, I listened to, I think it was 22 or 23 audiobooks on this subject as I was writing. And there were times where I would start crying because I I heard someone else's experience that reflected mine, that I had never felt that connection before. I never knew anyone else saw this specific thing or experienced this specific thing. So just to know that, and I have already had readers reach out to me and be like, "I've never talked to anyone about this, but oh my gosh, I couldn't believe when I heard this, this specific thing that you saw. I saw that too." Um, and it like warms my heart to know that I can make other people feel that way, that comfort, that sense uh of connection, or um kind of the community might not be the right word, but um kind of that feeling that they're a part of something much bigger, and that there are other people that have these experiences too.
The I was trying to think, like, without sounding cliche or whatever, but why do you think they chose you?
That is a question that I do still have, because I know that a lot of the so I've always been into this stuff, kind of researching it, reading about it, talking to people about it, but these past couple years I've been really, really diving deep. And most of the things that I hear from other experiencers is um, they grew up without this stuff, and at the age of 25 or at the age of 45, they have this wild encounter that changes their life, or and that kind of opens the door to a couple other things that might happen. But it's not very common that you hear from another experiencer that they were born being and taken out of body and tested and taught things and encountered with all these sorts of beings, and that never asked for it. Like I never, as a toddler, as a child, or even growing up, I never went out of my way and said, okay, I want to know, I want to have an encounter, I want to have it just happened, it came to me. And so I do wonder, why why me? Was there something about me after I was born, that like my aura that they saw was a good fit for some purpose, some specific thing? Or was it something I agreed to before I came into this specific physical life? Um, but I do know that from it, and from being immersed in this, um, this otherworldly stuff since the beginning of my life my purpose is to open other people's eyes to it and to help shed light on these things.
I wonder if, and this is not necessarily anything anyone can answer, but like, I wonder if people like you, people like these other experiencers, and even what I do here at this show is, again, giving people the opportunity to share their experiences because I'm also an experiencer as well. Are we doing this by design because we're supposed to be helping people out, hope, and trying to get people to awaken to these things? But if that is the case, why are we all just not aware of it in the first place? Why do we have to become aware of this? Like, what happened to us to not be knowing of these other entities, these other beings? Like, where does, again, it goes back to what I'd said earlier about how I think we're capable of a lot of things, but we're shut off from it somehow. There's like a disconnect. And if they're trying to reconnect that with us, who shut it off? How do we get disconnected in the first place? And why is it such a specific person that gets targeted out to do this rather than a mass of awakening?
Yeah, I have the same questions, honestly. And it just leads to so many more questions. These big questions like why are we disconnected from our abilities today? How long ago did that happen? Why did it happen? Who did it? Did we do it to ourselves? Was it an external source that did it to us? Was it some malevolent being that did it to us? Was it a whole? Yeah, I mean, you could really go anywhere with like, wondering how that happened. But yeah,
It's like the age old question of why are we here? Like, what is our
yeah.
purpose? Like, we're not going to get that answer. And I think the more we dig into it, the more people become aware of it is great. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're ever going to have the answer, at least not in my lifetime, to where we are who we are, why we are who we are. Like, what is the purpose? I think there's more to it. It's just a matter of, I don't know if we get that in this physical form that we're in right now.
Why we're here and our purpose, I feel, is just to have that. Like, I feel that we were created to have that bond with the creator and the others that were created, and to just experience this incredible life. But it's supposed to be so much more incredible than what we experience right now because we're really fully bound by the physical and material, and we're not supposed to be. That wasn't the original intention, for humanity to be like closed off from the other realms and from the other dimensions and from their abilities and from all these incredible things that we can do. um so this life as we experience it today, it's like it makes it harder for people to be like, why am I here? Because this physical world can be pretty dull. It could be pretty like purposeless in some instances. And but like then but when you tap into the true nature of this life we're actually in and escape these restrictions that we have, it changes that, and it opens up like, oh my gosh, there's so much more, and it means so much more than just the physical or material world. It has such a deeper meaning, and the opportunities are endless, and the experiences are endless. And yeah, the it's hard to put words on. um but yeah, I mean, we're here for a greater purpose than what we're experiencing right now. And I, I just something just tells me that that's that's going to change soon. Those doors are going to start opening again. um and us discovering who we really are, and is going to start happening within my lifetime. I'm 31, and so I just feel that within the next 50 years we're going to start once again seeing these and experiencing and performing these things that people now would say is sci-fi or is fake or is, is crazy. But I feel that we're going to start really understanding life again and why we're here and who we are.
What we're doing right now used to be considered sci-fi.
Right.
So I don't doubt that we're going to have a lot of advancements when it comes to technologies, and the things that we think about today will be in the next 50 years will be different. But we can probably wrap this up, and I want you to let everyone know that's listening where they can find your book at.
Yeah, so you can find my book on Amazon, and it's called Born Awakened, An Otherworldly True Story by Samantha Leifger. And you can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, and Substack by looking up Born Awakened.
You mentioned Reddit. That's how we actually got connected originally. How is
Yeah.
your Reddit experience so far?
So I've known what Reddit was for some years now, but I never really got into using it until I started writing. And so I'm a part of like a lot of the experiencer groups, the UFO groups, the paranormal groups and stuff like that. And it really it's been really cool to be able to connect with people who are just loving to talk about this stuff. There's a lot of people that really open up about this stuff on there, and it's really cool to see. And I actually, I think it was just a couple months ago, maybe just a month or two ago, that I created a subreddit called Ask Experiencers. Um, and so I think there's 150 some people on it so far, but it's fun. I really grew to like Reddit a lot, and I've actually connected with you and with several other people on there over this stuff, and I love it. It's cool, and it's unique from Facebook or Instagram. It's nice that it's just filled with these groups that people can just spill their experiences into and share it with each other.
I need to find those groups because a lot of the ones that I get into are a lot of trolls involved.
There are, yeah. I've noticed that certain groups, especially certain UFO groups for some reason, I feel like there's a lot of people, like at least half of the people on some of those groups are just on there because they just want to tell people that their experiences are just
Crazy.
not
Yeah.
real, like, or they're just there to be an unchangeable skeptic, or to argue with people. There is a lot of that on a lot of groups on Reddit, and
The
especially
cryptid groups,
certain ones.
the cryptid
But
groups
I
are just
know
as
that.
bad.
Sorry.
The cryptid groups are just as bad. Like literally, if someone posts a photo of something, they're getting harassed by so many people.
I know. I noticed that too when I first joined the a couple cryptid groups, and so I recognize the word cryptid as, I mean, I know there's a couple different definitions, sure, but um as let's say Bigfoot, Dogman, Mothman, stuff like that. Um and so I did come across a couple other people posting it, and everybody saying this is not what a cryptid really is, and this is not the scientific, like, oh, okay. I mean,
Yep. You will have that with so many people, and because you just lump Mothman as a cryptid, someone would tell you that Mothman is not a cryptid. Which
yeah.
I don't know how their definitions go, but Mothman to certain people is not considered a cryptid. I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know how it couldn't be a cryptid.
Because they think
Honestly.
it's probably a spiritual thing, or they also said it could be an interdimensional thing, or it was, in fact, just a large bird. I was like, okay,
Mm.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that happened in during the time that people were seeing the Mothman and
Yep.
before the bridge collapsed that a bird couldn't do. There was some really strange paranormal events that happened that it goes way beyond some material explanation or just an animal or. But honestly, for me, when I think about cryptids and these strange beings that people witness, I think that for me, my definition of a cryptid is it is interdimensional. It is spiritual. It is whatever you want to say. They do go back and forth between the physical and wherever they came from. Just like how people can see Bigfoot disappear all of a sudden, out of just, all of a sudden gone. He's disappeared. Or um, same thing with the Mothman or with what is it? It's not called Wolfman. I don't know why I can't think of it. The Dogman. I know there's a lot of stories up here in Michigan regarding the Dogman. Um, but yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot to it, but well,
yeah, I could go on for a long time
mhm.
about all that stuff.
Well, Samantha, again, for anyone listening, your book is called Born Awakened. They can find it on Amazon, and you are available on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, all the social medias. But it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you letting me talk about all my experiences and my book and everything.
About how many pages is your book for anyone that's curious?
It is 241, I believe.
So a good read for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good size. It's not too big, but it's long enough where it's got a lot of content in it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Samantha for being on here today. And we will check you guys out on the next one. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can also go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Just make sure to reach out and get a hold of me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. You can also find Tinfoil Tales on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Tinfoil Tales Podcast. You can reach out to me that way too. Remember to share the show around. Word of mouth is the best way to help the show grow. And just remember, truth comes at cost. Are you willing to pay the price?